Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Burnt Brass Homestead channel. This video completes the 8-week journey to raise Cornish cross chickens, to process them, and finally preserving them. Please check out the Meat Bird playlist to see how we got to this point. The chicken is seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic granules. 2 or 3 jars of this chicken will be canned with just this base seasoning, in which I will make things like chicken salad or chicken pot pie or chicken noodle soup. The rest of the chicken will be canned in jerk seasoning, which goes well with a side of cabbage and something like cornbread, or macaroni and cheese and string beans or broccoli. The process that I'm following today is what is known as cold pack method, meaning the food, or in this case the chicken, is not pre-cooked. The chicken will be packed in jars and added to the canner. Then the canner will be turned on to begin heating everything up. Canning this chicken provides a good tasting quick meal that only needs to be reheated. No water or liquid is needed. So during something like a power outage, we will still be able to enjoy a good meal. It also makes the food shelf stable without refrigeration. The last time I canned jerk chicken, it only lasted a few months, and we ate the last jar about 2 weeks ago. So this time around I want to make 2 batches. I will make the second batch at a later date. This meat is pretty much ready to go into the jars. The seasoning will work its way through the flesh during the canning process. However, it is getting late, and I would rather the chicken marinate in the refrigerator for 24 hours before canning it. These chicken wings were not canned. They were just seasoned and frozen. And I ended up making buffalo chicken wings out of them. This meat is covered in seasoning and placed in the bags, massaged, and ready to go in the refrigerator. To avoid any leaks, I like to place raw meat in a container or on a plate before putting it in the refrigerator to avoid any possible contamination with other produce. The benefit to raw pack, the raw pack method is that it's quick. You do not need to spend time browning or cooking the meat, so you don't need a lot of stovetop space. I didn't even need to allow the chicken to marinate. I could have just added the raw chicken as it was to the jars, topped it with maybe a teaspoon of salt or no salt at all, and canned it that way. The con to raw pack is that you do not cook the meat or brown it, which a lot of people like doing because of the extra flavors incorporated into the meat. Also, with hot pack, there is a lot of shrinkage, so you can pack more meat into each jar. However, with raw pack, there is no shrinkage. The meat is raw, so you have to push, punch, and pack the meat into the jars. Even then, you do not get as much meat into the jars as you would with the hot pack method. Another con with the raw pack method is that there are occasions when the liquid does not cover the meat. It is recommended that you do not add water to raw pack method since the liquid is drawn from the meat during the processing. But some people do like to add a tablespoon of liquid to the jars to ensure that the meat is covered. However, I recommend you follow the instructions in the Ball Canning Book or the National Center for Home Food Preservation website without any deviations until you have a good amount of canning experience. I will provide the URL for the NCHFP website in the description. Now for the chicken legs, I used quart-sized jars. The pint-sized jars were not tall enough for the drumsticks. In addition to packing the drumsticks in the quart-sized jars, I was able to pack down a few extra smaller pieces of chicken from the thighs and the breasts. If processing 2 different sized jars in a batch, or if you mix and match something like stock and meat in the same batch, you have to follow the requirements for the item that takes the longest to process. For example, I am canning a pint of boneless chicken that requires 75 minutes of processing at my altitude. If I were also canning a quart of boneless chicken, it would require 90 minutes of processing time at my altitude. Therefore, I would have to can this batch at 90 minutes. The pints would slightly over-process, but that's not a big deal. Although, try to process items that require the same amount of time. With that said, bone-in chicken does not require as much time to process as boneless chicken. Therefore, in my case, a quart of bone-in chicken requires only 75 minutes to process. Therefore, I only need to process this batch of chicken for 75 minutes. Here is a closer look at the processing times for canning chicken. It is broken down by the canner type, whether it is gauge, pressure gauge, or weighted gauge. You can also see that the processing times depend on whether or not the chicken is boneless or bone-in, or pint versus quart. And this information is pulled directly from the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. You do not see that I cleaned the rims of the jars with vinegar, but this is a necessary step always, and I did wipe each of the jars before placing the lids on top of them. The jars are cleaned to remove any food residue, oil, or grease. This was the last jar that I filled with chicken, and it still had the funnel on top of it. So this was the last jar that needed to be wiped down, and I was able to get this captured on video. Now that all the jars are wiped down and the lids are on, I now place the rings on the jars and I tighten them finger tight. You don't want them too tight, nor do you want them too loose. Again, this is the raw pack or cold pack method of canning this chicken. Therefore, everything is still cool at this point. I place the jars in the canner before turning the stove on. This is an All-American 930 canner, and it can hold 19 jars of 19 pint jars or 14 quart jars by stacking them. This will be a full batch job with a mixture of pint and quart sized jars. With this canner, before placing the lid on, I have to wipe it with oil, thin layer of oil. I use olive oil to make sure that the lid does not stick to the pot, since this is metal to metal. The lid is locked into place and the knobs opposite of each other are tightened simultaneously to help keep the lid level. Once the jars are in the canner, I turn on the heat, but I do not crank it on high. I allow the water and chicken to warm up a bit before raising the temperature. This part of the process for a raw pack method is longer than that of the hot pack method. Here I allow the canner to vent for a full 10 minutes, after which I place the 10-pound weight on the vent and allow the jars to process for 75 minutes. At the end of the 75 minutes, I turned off the canner and waited for the pressure gauge to reach 0. Then I waited another 20 minutes before slowly removing the weight. I opened the canner away from my face to allow steam to escape in the opposite direction. Then I removed the jars from the canner and left them to sit overnight. Afterwards, I removed the rings, wiped down the jars, dated the jars, and then stored them. This was the result of the 5 chickens that were not frozen. I hope you enjoyed this little series. Please like, subscribe, and share if you like this content.